Adam, welcome to FireCast.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Grateful to have you here, brother. I'm excited to learn a lot from you, and our audience is equally, if not more, excited.
Thank you.
Where are you from, Adam?
Born and raised in Brooklyn. Been here for almost 21 years.
Nice.
Yeah, but New York, born and raised through and through.
And what brought you to Los Angeles?
I was planning on moving back from Miami to New York. Ended up interviewing at a talent agency, William Morris agency in New York. Got a job out here. Never the plan. Thrilled it happened that way.
Did you work at the agency or?
I did. Yeah, I was at the agency for a little under 2 years, initially in music and then in TV.
Right.
Reality TV.
Oh, wow.
It was really highbrow, fine art, as one might say.
Yeah, well, Josh's childhood friend is the president of WME, but we won't dig into that.
Yep, I think I shared that with Adam.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ari's, he actually does fine art. He's on the scripted side of TV.
All right, there you go.
And so how long in that world?
So I was in between film and TV for almost 15 years.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, until 2019.
Okay.
Until the end of 2019.
And then that was the pivot to real estate.
Yeah, I had a series of pretty big setbacks. Me too. I didn't realize that I was in business with a lot of really unsavory characters. And a few of them got me too. The last person basically the last straw. I had Amber Heard's next film after Aquaman.
Wow.
Sold it to Amazon. It's called Run Away With Me. Took place in Paris. We were in Paris location scouting when the Johnny Depp divorce fiasco blew up, and she got blacklisted. Nobody would work with her, and so none of the other actors would work with her, and we didn't have enough time to replace her, and the movie died.
Wow.
Yeah, this stuff is for real. And then interesting too that without being one of the unsavory characters yourself,
Right.
still, and then also interesting statement like, I didn't realize I was in business with such unsavory characters, and I from an outsider, I'd be like, really?
Bullshit.
But I have to tell you that I was friendly with a guy who was super nice, normal, kind, and then he just had this whole like dark side that I didn't know about really until I read it in the newspaper.
And particularly, like, I don't know Adam that well, but what I do know is that you're just a natural optimist and very grateful, and
And a
give
nice
people
guy.
right, and you give people the benefit of the doubt.
A lot of benefit.
And I'm the same way.
Yeah.
And at times it comes back to bite you. And I always say, and I wouldn't change it.
Totally. I prefer to live from that space. In film you get rhino skin, like really thick skin, and that's painful at times, but also can be a huge blessing. Just street smarts and a lot of lessons.
And you take whatever happened, you'll unpack it for us now. And it's how you build resilience. The greatest gift is one's ability to adapt.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. The resilience piece.
Do you find that that the real estate business is more predictable than
100%. I mean, the thing for me, I didn't know really anything about real estate before I got my license. Even once I got my license, I still didn't know anything about real estate. And I remember reading the Altman Close as I was studying for the test. And thinking like, okay, well, these are some like real life, when you're studying for the exam, it's theoretical. That book had a bunch of practical. I remember this one story. He showed an off-market property to 3 celebrity clients. All three made offers. 2 people didn't get it. And so he bought both of them Rolexes. And I was like, oh, that's a good way to like patch a relationship up. Kind of like, interesting like real world tidbits.
For those people that are not doing, let's assume that was a $20 million, $30 million property. So when you sell it to one of your clients, you can then afford a Rolex for your other 2 clients that didn't get it. I'll take that from the highest level, still in the same area though, by the way, still in this high price point. From the highest level to the lowest level I've ever seen. And I was in business in this office with a team leader who's phenomenal and very high end. She was super luxury, super classy woman. And she was telling me about sending $5 gift cards to Starbucks. Now that was a lot of years ago, so I guess it would have to be like a $7.50 gift card to Starbucks. But at the time,
at least a latte, right?
Maybe,
at
yeah.
least.
I mean, not a large. And I was like, wait a minute, you're sending $5 Starbucks cards to these like high-end agents that, to thank them for something that they've done. I'm like, how does that work? And she said to me, you know what? I've been doing it for a year. It works magically. And had I known how well it worked, I would have been sending them all along. So, a Rolex is a big gesture. And I think that probably the gesture itself is probably 80 or 90% of it.
I would tend to agree.
I mean, I did get mad when I was a vendor that I spent a lot of money with brought me a bottle of wine. I hate to admit this, brought me a bottle of wine, and I looked it up. How much was it? And it was $9.50. I'm like, what? So
because at least the $5 gift card, you're not pretending to be
that's
something
true.
that it's
yeah,
not.
there you go.
It's authentic.
Thank you for bailing me out
Right,
there
yeah.
because this whole time I'm like, oh, I'm a jerk.
And my interpretation of that is relationships take time, and it's all about, as I always say, playing the long game. So, when you're building a relationship, there's going to be natural disappointment and adversity in any relationship. And how do you handle that is how you often have the opportunity to fortify the relationship. So, I think that's critical. And certainly so many people in real estate don't get that. They are way too transactional, I would argue, and not enough relational and building a long-term relationship, because you don't know when it comes back to you, both with transacting with them, but also them as advocates for you for well into the future.
100%. I actually have a story. I might have shared it with you over coffee, but very recently went up for a listing. Great experience. Sent over the contract. The owner, called me a few days later and said, listen, I have a 13-year relationship with this agent and my conscience is weighing on me, and I'm not ready to kill that relationship, and I'm so sorry. I said, no worries. We ran into each other the next day, and he said, are we good? And I said, yeah, we're totally good. The following day he called me and said, listen, I met with the agent. They really rubbed me the wrong way, and you handled the rejection so gracefully. It would be an honor if you would if you would sell this home for me. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yep.
I'm about to sell the home.
Bingo.
And it was the way I handled the rejection.
It is amazing, to handle that sort of thing with grace. And we get disappointed frequently. The more times that you're at this, and sometimes Josh will say, I'm surprised at the way that person handled that interaction, and you just keep taking the high road, and they'll forget the negative stuff, and you could just build it right back.
You'll build a fan. They'll tell 5 people.
Right. That's right.
Forget about it.
Yep.
Right.
And I think coming from just gratitude is, I continue to emphasize that. People want to be, I can speak for me, around those that are grateful, that are optimistic, that are willing to see things, as we always talk about, from the other person's perspective. And it's amazing how self-centered so many people are, and all they're thinking about is themselves and not about what's in it for the other person, right?
Yeah, totally. Empathy goes a long way.
It's in our nature to be self-centered.
Yeah.
So let's just throw that out there. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's exactly the way we're wired. And to deviate from that is one of the aspects of going the extra mile.
Yeah, and hopefully we're a more evolved being. So yes, that is human nature, to your point. And when you have enough discipline and foresight and empathy, once again, which is all developed, then you build much stronger, lasting relationships. And
100%.
I know how Adam gets that real well.
One of the things, because it's a national podcast, one of the things that people will say is, well, look, you came from William Morris, and of course you had this great Rolodex, and you being you also has a lot to do with it. So, as you are kind and good along the road, and how many times that's happened with us, we have so many realtors working for us. I bump into a realtor that worked for us 10 years ago as a junior assistant somewhere on one team in one of my offices. And he's like, oh, I know you. And I needed a favor from the guy. I needed help with my client. And I asked him, I was like, he's like, oh, well, you don't remember me, but and I was honest, like, actually, I don't remember. And I was sort of, joking, not joking. I was like, well, was I nice to you? And he's like, oh my God, you were so nice. And I felt a little relieved, but again, as long as you're kind to people all along the way, then you don't have to worry about the answer to that question. And it really did help me. It helped me in that deal to service a client. It's a very important client to me that it was the first deal I did with them, and it helped build the relationship.
Fantastic.
But
Coming back,
2019.
2019.
Yeah.
You made a pivot. Obviously, you went through your challenges in the entertainment space. So tell us more on why that pivot. And then after you tell us that, give us just a quick sense of what you've accomplished in the real estate world. And then we can unpack that in terms of just transact, however you want to describe it.
Thanks for the platform. So I was in Paris, movie imploded. I missed my flight back from Paris to LA, like by a few minutes, accidentally. And then I was like, why am I rushing back to LA? I'm just delivering bad news to investors. And also I started to have like serious anxiety, just for a lot of reasons. So I decided to go to Iceland. I took a 5-day trip solo to Iceland, got super quiet, didn't know anybody there. I was in a fjord one day, just kind of hanging out, thinking, gotta make some changes in my life. And I basically, I started talking to the universe, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have all the answers. I need some help. I would love some help. I'm lost and I don't know where I'm going. And then I spoke to some friends, my college roommate, a friend of mine in New York, both in real estate. They said, get your license. I wasn't excited about it, but I didn't have any other options that seemed better. So head down, studied, passed, and I felt like, okay, I'll do this in the meantime. This will be like maybe a 2-year thing while I figure out what I'm going to do. And when I jumped in, the day after I got my license, I signed up with the brokerage.
And that was when?
That was December. I got my license December 3rd, 2019, which is my birthday. That's why I remember the date. So on December 4th, I started. And I didn't know anything. I was, just tons of anxiety. And what I realized very quickly is the skill set of a great producer is the identical skill set of a great realtor. The product's different, but as a producer, you're, talking, to creatives and suits, you're negotiating, you are marketing, you're pitching. The pitch was my strength in entertainment. I would go into a studio, pitch them an idea, they would pay for the development. Similar to a listing presentation, but in the listing presentation, you're pitching an owner who generally really wants to sell. In entertainment, you're pitching a studio that really wants to not buy. It's a much harder sale. So also you're dealing with constant rejection in entertainment. Also, I feel like once I've hit my stride, I'm not dealing with anywhere near as much rejection now, but early on you deal with some rejection in real estate. And I felt like I had like this really strong, thick rhino skin where I was just like, I'm fearless. I don't know what I don't know. I'm just going to go in, not like a bull in a china shop, but like a ninja in a kung fu movie, and see what happens. It's a much faster business. So I felt surprisingly prepared. It's less complicated than film. Very interesting though. And I started to sell homes to friends in the film business who I got to know really well because there's so much trust involved in real estate. Someone gives you their bank account information. Also, you never know who's going to open the door. First open house I'm sitting, person signs in, then I Google them and I'm like, oh wow, this person just was robbed for $100,000 watch in New York. And I was like, looking down, I was like, okay, he can afford the house. I was just like, this is fascinating. You never know who you're going to meet. And so the, first, let's say month, I did a few really cheap leases, like $3,000 leases in Santa Monica. There was an agent who I was sitting open houses for, and he called me one day. Said, I've got a friend of mine's wife owns a place in Canoga Park. It's, not expensive. It's like $600,000, maybe even less. I think it was less, like $550,000. She has a license, but I told her about you, and we could, this could be your first listing. Set up the listing appointment, go out there. I call this agent 5 minutes before. I'm like, are you close? He's like, oh, I can't make it. I've never been on a listing appointment in my life. So I'm like, I don't really have a presentation. So I open the door. I'm like, all right, this is gonna be my house. And I give her an abbreviated pitch, but very confidently. And then I tell her my photographer is available on Wednesday or Thursday. What day is good for you? And she just said Thursday. I said, great. I own those photos, so it's going to be my listing. And I sold it super quick. And at the first open house, I priced it low. At the first open house, there were 15, 20 people waiting 15 minutes. Before I got there, they were there. And a couple came in. They said, we love the house. We'd love to, work with you. And we had just gotten an offer that was out for DocuSign. And I said, I want to be honest with you. The owner's about to accept an offer. So, love to help you if you're interested in backup. They called me that night and they said, we love your honesty. Our mom's looking to sell her home. Would you be interested in meeting with her? So I listed the mom's home, sold it, helped them buy. I sold that original listing, helped them buy another home, and then helped their cousin buy a condo in a very short amount of time, like months.
Wow.
And so things started to really snowball just really quickly. Rates dropped, in the spring. And then my friends were buying, and there, I've been through a few cycles. I've had my license for 5 years and 3 months now.
Wow.
So
that's amazing. You've done amazing stuff in 5 years and 3 months. No question.
I definitely was riding a nice high. I like to say like I was an accidental realtor sort of for like the first year and a half, where just all the market dynamics were working in my favor and tons of transactions. And then when rates started going up, April, May 2022, but I took a trip that summer. I was like, I felt like I kind of made it. Took like a month off, went to the Middle East, had a glorious time. I was in escrow, double ending a pretty chunky deal. Right before I got back, that deal exploded. Buyer pulled out on the last day of contingencies. And then when I got back, the phone stopped ringing. And I was like, okay. What am I gonna do? I had a real estate coach at the time, and he was like, "You should door knock. You should cold call." He's a great, incredible coach, and I tried those things. Didn't really work for me, but I did find I got momentum back. It took me realistically, 4+ months to get momentum going again. And once I did, I never looked back. I've
What were those like pivots, if I may ask, in that 4 months?
Yeah. So I would say in life, the way I found my place here today is I've tried things that haven't worked, and then I've figured out what does work for me. So my goal was never to get into real estate, but here we are. And I'm so thankful that I got into real estate. So I started doing all these things that didn't work for me: cold calling, expireds, door knocking. Like after having conversations with people I door knocked, I would write them handwritten letters. Like
doing you did all this stuff the right way.
All the stuff.
Yeah.
All the right stuff, all the right way. Still didn't work.
Right. And I wasn't doing it for a long period of time. Right. I'm sure over a long horizon probably would have worked. But what I started doing, so in May 2021, here's like a break that I had because of an entertainment connection. So my producing partner on that Amber Heard film, this guy named Adrian, who's a big European film financier. He owns a home. He used to own a home. I sold it behind Chateau Marmont in the hills. And I was up against, should we name names in the show? Or?
Sure, why not?
Okay, cool.
Behind the chateau near the Gettys.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was up against some of the bigger realtors in LA. Tammy Pardee was one of them.
Sure.
and I know this because the house manager
Friend of mine,
actually gave me the presentations.
Wow.
Aaron Kerman was another one. They hired me, and after they hired me, I found out that I was up against these people, and I was like, why didn't you choose Aaron Kerman?
Wow, right?
Yeah.
And, they said, you were on time, and you were deeply passionate about the home, and your pitch was the best. And I was like, that's crazy. Really? Anyway, so I got it, sold it. And I got a text message from someone I didn't know. This woman, Kayla, who said, listen, I'm the head of recruiting for Aaron Kerman. He'd like to talk to you about your future in luxury real estate. I wasn't planning on making a move, but met with Aaron, who has a track record of selling massive estates.
Incredible. Yeah.
Incredible. And jumped over, and Aaron said, listen, you should coach with my real estate coach. His name's Dave Colwell. Fantastic coach. Started coaching with Dave.
You know,
He used to work for us.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I know Dave quite well.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's also interesting that sometimes our experience of people, is very different. Like I'm often surprised. There's a couple of other folks that, and I'll leave Dave Colwell out of it because he's a very good guy. But we've had other people that worked for us that were like, there's one guy in particular, that name I won't mention, but the guy was like a total flake and a dud and whatever, and then fast forward 7-8 years, they're like, yeah, we're coaching with Coach so and so. I'm like, are you serious? And then the agent was a great agent, way better agent than this guy had ever been. And it was really interesting because he's like, oh yeah, well, I love this guy's, this guy helped me do this listing. I'm like, well, show me a listing presentation. I'm like, wow, that's really good,
That's why, it's amazing how you combine different people, different environments, different, and I think that's great. That's the beauty of the world. It's like different combinations work much more effectively than others. So there's opportunity for everyone if you do the right things and you connect with the right people and you build the right relationships.
That one particular guy I won't mention, but then there's also we'll have him on the podcast at some point in time. Kevin Ward I've had other people tell me like, oh yeah, I coach with Kevin, and he gives me like the 6 killer questions or whatever. I'm like, what are the questions? And he's like, I never do a listing presentation without the 6 Kevin Ward questions or whatever they were. And Kevin again was a team leader with us and was not particularly successful in that role. But and I love the guy, and we got to have him on the podcast because he's killing it as a coach.
And I'm just while we're in a pause for a second, a couple things because they're so passionate for me and they're so synergistic with everything you said. One is like you said, you were in Iceland. Like I'm a big believer, like asking for help is a sign of strength. And I think many people do not get that. Yeah. And I don't care how successful you are, no one knows it all. And having humility and asking for help can often bring you amazing clarity and answers. So kudos 100%. To you there.
And thank you.
And then last one is embrace fear and let it propel your growth, right? When we, like you said, you were, you had that listing appointment and you were then all of a sudden flying solo. We all have choices at that moment.
Yes.
We can either run away and retreat, or we can embrace it and let it be a tremendous opportunity to learn, to grow, to build skill, to build resilience, to build confidence. And that's a choice that you made, and it's a big reason you're sitting here right now.
Totally.
And when you mentioned that point of him, of Adam, going back to Iceland and being able to ask for help, he was sitting by himself and, in Iceland by himself and asking these questions. And I reflect on that. First of all, I had a great teacher who gave me all these phenomenal questions to ask. And one of the cool things about the questions were that, I don't like to really ask a question necessarily unless I know what the answer is. Well, then why are you asking the question if you know what the answer is, right? So it's, but to not beat yourself up for having the question that you don't have the answer to, and knowing that you can just ask it and see what comes up, and nothing great comes up, and you just ask it again. If you one of the great questions that he taught me, and I'll name names on that because it's interesting. It's Ricky Williams, who was the famous and also infamous football player that I was very tight with for a period of time and was a great coach for me. And he would say, what about this? So like you have some major setback. What about this can really serve me would be one version of the question. And when you get the big setback, you're like, okay, so what about this could really serve me? And you're like, absolutely nothing. That's what, right? And you're like, oh, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. You keep asking the question. And then sort of connecting that to another piece. My girlfriend actually at that time had studied yoga with this Indian guru. And I heard him speak like only one time. And he was talking about, guru means teacher. And he says, here's the thing. You're calling me because somebody was a live interaction. Guys, you're calling me your guru, and that's fine. You want me as your teacher. But here's the thing. The greatest guru for any person is themselves. Yep. And the interesting thing that he said was, you always, if you need me to help you, like, okay, I'll help you. But I've got to tell you that you always have the answers. The answers are always inside of you. But they whisper, they don't scream. And so when you're running around going like, oh my God, what's going on or whatever, you'll never hear that guru inside that actually has the answer until you calm down, quiet down, and ask those questions. And it can be hard to get to that place for when you're freaking out in Paris that your thing just exploded.
The last thing I'm going to say is because you find what you're looking for. So if you keep asking the
right questions,
you'll eventually find the answer.
It's framing,
it's all choices, right? So
the flip side is when people get upset about something, or I thankfully, knock on wood, rarely do it, but I will do it sometimes when I leave my backpack. Like I go to the bathroom at the airport. I'm like, I left my computer like sitting out like in the airport, and in that moment in time, I'll be like what the F is wrong with me, Yeah. And so thankfully, like I say, very rarely I have that issue, but that's where I have it in instances like that. And I got to tell you, when you ask that question, your brain searches for the answer. Mm-hmm. And that's why you do not want to ask those you don't want to ask those questions like, what's wrong with me? Or, why am I such a jerk or whatever? It's like, there's a different way to ask that. Yeah.
Bring us back to where you end up going to work with Aaron.
Yeah, so Aaron basically sat me down. He said, listen, it's impressive what you've done in 18 months. And I see you selling $20+ million homes. I can help you do that. I can help you brand yourself. And kind of, what do you think? And I said, yes. And so one of the things that I liked is, coaching was highly encouraged there. And even the manager there, Nina, would do coaching like one-on-one with agents. And I was like, wow, this is really progressive. It's I feel like it's an environment where everyone is encouraged to thrive. Not to say that, there definitely was for sure a little competition between some of the agents, but you can either subscribe or unsubscribe. I wasn't subscribing to any of that. And there was a lot of opportunity. And so when in November of 2022, which was right when the market was like not in a great place, he formed his own brokerage with Christie's.
Yep.
And I decided to stay with Compass and bet on myself. Mm-hmm. And he and I have a great relationship. He did tell me recently, or maybe it was Nina, that I'm like one of only 2 out of 80 people didn't come. I think there was a lot of fear, and I was just like, hey, I'm betting on myself. And it was a good bet.
When you say a lot of fear, you mean fear with people who went along, or
I think there was just fear in general amongst realtors, like with higher rates and
of course,
lower transactions.
Of course.
Like I remember going to like the first meeting and like looking around the room and people were shook. Like it was not
absolutely
a warm room. Also, I think to generalize, I think people who join teams aren't necessarily rainmakers. So they're looking to associate with the rainmaker so that they can build their business, which makes a lot of sense.
Of course.
And that's what I did. I mean, that's not what I set out to do, but that was the invitation, the opportunity, and I said yes. And I felt like at that point, like, would I have benefited staying for a while longer? Probably. I mean, you know, there's pros on both
Right.
sides.
It's cost benefit. Yep.
Yeah, cost benefit. And I was just like, you know, the officers in Beverly Hills, I'm more on the west side. There are a lot of other reasons. But I'm an entrepreneur. I'll bet on myself all day, and I will continue to do that. And that's why I did that.
It's also knowing yourself, which is such an important, you know, thing, is having a degree of self-awareness, because we all have strengths and weaknesses.
Sure.
And the more we are honest and aware of what those are, the more effective we position ourselves to be successful and be the best version of ourselves.
100%.
And going back to the time period where you transition from one career to another, that's also a common theme in real estate. And sure, you are in LA and you're transferring from producing big movies to selling real estate, and so everyone's going to think like, oh, that's easy. And I have coached with people and worked with people. Lots of people are transitioning from one thing to another, and they may have been great at what they did before, but saying, okay, I really did a good job, like with your client Adrian, I did a great job. You know, I did a great job putting this movie thing together. How does that translate into selling this expensive house, and how are you going to demonstrate that expertise? So how do you go from even being strong in a great profession, but now it's a different profession? How do you tell everybody, hey, I'm doing this and I'm just as good at this, or I'm better at this, or trust me with your biggest asset?
Great question. So early on, I had a friend, studio executive, who's kind of like joking, making fun slightly of me. And he was like, so what do you put on your business card? Like, producer, realtor? I said, I'm a realtor. I used the first few months to just soak everything up like a sponge as much as possible. I never did an introduction to Adam Brawer real estate email. I never did anything like that. The first thing I did when I first got my first open house sign, I did a story on Instagram, just me and the open house sign. I think inviting people to an open house. And a lot of people were like, actually not even, just me and the open house sign, just, that was kind of a soft announcement. And people were like, what are you doing? And I was just like, oh, you didn't know I had my license? Of course they didn't know, because I didn't have my license. And I got into a lot of conversations. And then if you're around at 2 p.m. on Sunday, come on through. So people would come on through. They would see me tour the home, feel a little bit more comfortable with me. Then I started listing homes, and I would invite them, and they would come, and they would feel more comfortable with me. And then they would say, we are looking to buy a home. Could you help us? Totally. So it took months, not a crazy amount of time, but it took 6 months for people to now see me. I mean, it was an identity shift, really. It wasn't just a career. It was like an identity shift. So it took a little while, and then people started talking. And then the narrative changed, and all of my social media became real estate. And then it's just kind of stopped being a question.
It's a process.
Was there a point though, because even you said when you first transitioned, you're like, I'm going to try this out for a year or so. And I do think that having that attitude would slow things down, but it sounds like as soon as people want certainty. Certainty takes away risk, and that certainty is like, I may have been a producer yesterday, but today I'm a realtor from now
to infinity.
Till infinity, as far exactly. How did you?
You said it too. You said there was an identity shift. So
yeah, there was a full on, because everybody knew me as this thing, as this person who does this thing on the weekends too. It's like, and so about 2017, I moved to Topanga and started hanging out with a new community. And it wasn't in any way transactional. I remember on the weekends, for the first, 10, 15 years I lived in LA, you would, do drinks and they would be like business drinks. And then you would do like, oh, it's so-and-so's birthday. And it's like, there's an angle there. Someone's pitching something, packaging a movie, something's going on. But once I started hanging out in this new community, we never, ever talked about work, to the point where a few years in, people would reach out on Instagram and say like, oh, check out this product. It would be good for your clients. This is just before I got into real estate. I was like, I don't have clients. Like, what do you think I do? And they were like, oh, I thought you were like a personal trainer. And I was like, oh, well, these people don't even know what I do. Like, that's kind of awesome. So I, in terms of the identity shift, I just dove all the way in. I just dove all the way in, and I stopped talking about film, period. And just fully committed myself. And I feel like that level of commitment resonated with people. And also there was a death and a rebirth process. And it was very confusing. I also had a very short, I had invested about 80% of my stock portfolio into my film company to start it with a partner. So when that imploded, I was like, all right, well, all my ships are burned now.
Right.
This has to work. There's no other option. This is it.
Yep. It's amazing when you go all in on something and there is no real plan B, how different your actions, your decisions, and how people respond to you are. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, to your point, clarity. Right? When people know there's no uncertainty both within yourself and people don't feel uncertainty around you. They know you're all in, you're a real estate agent. That's what you do. That's your identity. That's your commitment to yourself and to them. Just opportunities start to abound if you're delivering value.
100%.
And I've seen this, obviously, right? We've seen so many careers being in the business for, 25 years and having, I'd like to see how many, we have 2,000 realtors working for us now, but, over the course of time, how many folks have sort of come in and out of our lives and the careers we've seen. And I will tell you that my advice is always that real estate in particular is not a good part-time job.
No.
I mean, it really isn't. And I tell the story often, about a very good friend of mine who was a television producer. She's quite good. And she's like, I want to go into real estate. And I'm like, you'll be great. Let's sit down. Let's have lunch. The lunch turns out to be 2.5 hours. And after the lunch, she's like, yeah, I'm not going to be a realtor. And she continues to this day to thank me for that, because I just said, and by the way, some people I think are more naturals than others, and she in particular would be great. But then I was just like, she was going to do it part-time and she was going to do this, and I'm like, this is what you need to do to build a real sustainable business. And I think it probably is because we have a certain number of deals that I call, I'm actually, I don't know what I call it. You have to tell me what I call it, but it's the deals you sort of bump into. So it's like, my sister, moved to town and she needed a house or whatever it is. Like, there's a certain number of deals that different people have more than others, but it's just bump into them. And then there are the deals that are like really truly generated, like a real generated, earned deal. And the amount of energy that it takes to sell a house, to list a house, or to get a buyer into a house that at one point was a total stranger. The amount of energy and time and effort that it gets to do that is so huge that you put all that energy into it, and then the second one just doesn't take as much energy. It's like the liftoff. It takes takes a lot of power to get a rocket, so much energy to get a rocket off the launch pad. But once it's going, once it's circling the Earth in the orbit, it's like it's practically frictionless. And so that's where you want to get your real estate business too. But there's so much to get it there. And part-time is just not the way to do it.
Yeah, it's momentum. It's right. An object in motion tends to stay in motion, but to start to create the motion and get the initial inertia takes a lot more energy. You know, and
Totally.
that has to do with, again, what we say, play the long game, as I always say, with urgency. And it comes from commitment and being all in, where there is no other. How many people that we work with are like, they're hedging their bets at every moment, right?
Yeah.
People feel that. You know, and there is a time and a place to hedge, but if you want to be extraordinary at anything, it's all in or not at all, in my opinion.
For sure.
And that's what I tell friends. I have
Yeah.
friends, you know, every so often who come to me and they're, you know, an influencer or they do this and that. And they're like, you know, they're like, I watch all the real estate shows. Like I would
watch none of
love
them.
to do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, cool. Like, let's talk about it. And we got to talking about it. And it's always like, you know, I'd love to do this like part-time, do like 6 deals a year. And I'm like, I just would highly advise that you don't get your license.
Yeah.
Like,
It works, you know, especially in a high price point. There are instances where it works, and we're in business with a guy who crushes it, by the way. But you know, if he were to take the position of like, my wife's you know, a very well connected doctor, and I'm going to get, you know, a few deals that sort of spill off of her, you know, that could be the cruise control, and you could do fairly well at that. Now he does that, and then and he crushes it because he's, you know, he's doing everything else in addition to that.
yes.
But I have, you know, when you first, you mentioned being in Topanga, you mentioned being in that neighborhood. I have a good friend who lives in Topanga. It's very unique for sure. Were you focused in your area, or?
No, I wasn't. So when I first got started, I was going wherever the deals, like wherever somebody wanted to buy, I was selling. You know, I did Valley, I did Pasadena, I did Manhattan Beach, Santa Monica. I mean, I was driving all over the place. Arrowhead. Now I am more specialized. Like say I do Malibu down to the marina. I mean, the truth is I do the Hollywood sign west, but most of my deals are on the west side.
What do you do to stay on top of the market? You know, I guess it's a whole list of questions, but how do you continue to sustain your business? Let's start with how much business do you do?
Yep.
So this is definitely going to be my biggest year. So I'll give you sort of the progression. When I first started, you know, I was listing $600,000, $800,000, $900,000 homes, really super duper modest. In 20,
And you did how many of those?
the first year I did like something like 17.
Wow,
that's
yeah.
amazing.
Huge.
It was pretty huge, especially, I mean, everyone was buying. I mean,
It was good timing.
But still, nevertheless,
Yeah.
for first year, that's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, it was a
no matter
lot.
what market conditions. Yep.
17 deals in 1 year. That's year one. That's massive.
yeah, I mean, definitely lucky for sure.
Yeah, I always come back to like, I don't believe in luck.
Yeah,
It's the old saying, it's where preparation meets opportunity, because you said some things earlier. And one thing that I know about you is that you are prepared. It's not like you're going into things blindly. So
Thoroughly prepared, ready for everything. That helped a lot, and also very available for clients. I am still very available. I mean, the difference between then and now is I would work with anybody looking to transact when I first started. Anybody looking to transact, I'm here. Now I'm working with clients who I feel aligned with. It's definitely not just about the deal size, for sure. I want to make sure that this is someone I want to pick up the phone for. This is somebody who I enjoy having a meal with. Because most of my business now is referral. So if I'm only working with aligned people, all of their referrals will be aligned.
I'm so passionate. I probably say it 10 times a day, is alignment in everything. Like, how do you create mutual benefit? How do you, it's what I said to you just a few minutes ago. How do you all row in the same direction where it benefits everyone? Because when everyone's incentives are aligned, it's amazing how much magic can happen with people that are like-minded.
Now,
100%.
One of the things I want to dig, we'll sort of fire down a little bit more. But one of the things that you said you talked about availability with clients, and then on the other hand, I think that somebody that's as busy as you also has to have boundaries.
100%.
So how do you balance availability? Hey, I'm available for you, and then boundaries.
What I'll do is if somebody reaches out during off hours or even on hours, I'll generally text back quickly, hey, I'm stepping into a podcast, or, I will be available at this time, meaning I'm not available now, but here's when I am available. So they know that the message has been received.
It's great.
They know when we'll talk, manage expectations, and we're good. When early on, I remember specifically, I was introduced to a couple looking to sell a place in Venice and buy a place in Manhattan Beach. The place in Manhattan Beach was at the time the largest sale I'd ever done. They didn't know how long I'd been in the business, and I made it my absolute top priority. So generally, within 60 seconds of a text, I would have responded back. And that level of attention went, it's like fabled service. They tell everybody about it. After I found out, after we removed all contingencies, the wife was best friends with one of my best friends. She knew that I had a year experience. The husband didn't, and the husband is very wealthy. And when he found out, she mentioned it in passing, his jaw dropped. Almost like I've been duped, kind of. He was like, and then he was just like, you know what? It doesn't show. He's like, I had no idea. Like,
love it.
Yeah. So I just,
knowing when and where to have that. Gary Gold, similarly, when we interviewed him about the Playboy Mansion, he knew that was going to be a career changing sale, and he just like, and he said, I make more money on selling other things because. The amount of time and energy and effort, I knew there was no way I wasn't gonna, and he was on it. But I do like the point of immediate acknowledgement, but then setting an expectation, and I'm working on that, But then even then, what I'll catch myself doing is like, I'll call you in an hour, and then it's like an hour and a half, which also isn't good. It's better to say, I'll call you in 2 hours and then call in an hour and a half.
Exactly. Under promise, over produce.
Yeah.
And that's what, as a producer, that's what you're supposed to do. Under promise, over produce. So I like to do that in real estate, and I do that a lot of the time. Not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time. Another
thing, you talk about fabled service. I love that. I haven't heard that term before. We didn't read the book. We saw a guy speak a couple of times who wrote the book called Unreasonable Hospitality.
Great title.
Yeah, it's a great title. And he was the head of a restaurant that had gotten the best restaurant in the world award. And
is it the was it the Fat Duck or something?
No.
Well, every year it's a different restaurant.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. And that was, it's just going the extra mile, and it is amazing, the extra mile. It's not that much more generally, and how you can distinguish yourself.
And again, just to reiterate, it's managing expectations, because people want certainty. So when you've created an expectation, you're creating clarity and certainty for them. Even if they don't like the expectation, they know where they stand, and then they can plan accordingly. And that's just good for everyone.
Yeah. And I've also noticed, initially I was like reluctant to not make myself available, but I've realized by setting boundaries, there's more respect from the client.
Absolutely.
It's more like on a even playing field.
You're creating a self-worth.
Yes.
when you push back on that. Josh is amazing with it, for sure.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that.
You mentioned a lot of your business is referral. One of the struggles that a lot of people have is that even when they provide fabled service, I've had people say to me, I will never use another person for a real estate deal as long as I live. That's
Wow.
You want to hear that magical. That's magical. And this particular person who we had talked about before, I won't name him, his network is massive. And how do I get that guy who I was referred to him? My goal was that he call back the other guy and be like, right?
Yeah.
And the guy who referred me was like, do not drop the ball on this. I'm like, I got it. He did exactly what I said. He called back our mutual friend. He's like, I will never do a real estate deal without this guy, to the point where I'm looking at another city, and I might have to use a realtor in another city. I want Paul to like
be involved.
Yeah,
Right.
be an armchair quarterback on this, because I want that level of protection. But my question to you is, so this person has phenomenal network. How do I get him? 'Cause he's so busy. How do I get him to refer his other friends?
I mean, one thing so obviously being top of mind is so important. If somebody knows, likes, and trusts you and you're top of mind, you're probably going to get the business. I like to call it keeping in flow with clients.
That's great.
And flow can be a number of different touches. Every 2 weeks, I do an email newsletter, highly curated. It's not like, here are my new listings. I do include listings in there, but there's market research in there. There's economic data in there. There are things to do in LA in there. There's my own personal like mini essay at the top, where the market is, where things are going. Events, video, like it's pretty curated.
And it's bi-monthly.
Bi-monthly. So I do that bi-monthly.
How much time do you spend doing it? Where do you get your info?
So I write, I'm giving all the secrets away.
Usually,
I write,
But by the way, we talk
happy
about it all
to.
the time.
I don't usually
giving
worry
all the
about
secrets away. And do you know how many people will
follow
actually
them? 0.
Correct.
And you build a lot of credibility by
Yeah.
doing that, and it always
It's a way to give back.
comes back.
Abundance. Go ahead.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I'll write the preamble. So I've got an amazing assistant. Her name's Pua Hall. She was actually an NCAA national champion gymnast at UCLA. And I was a college athlete as well. And her work ethic's phenomenal. So I'll write the preamble.
What was your sport? Sorry.
I was gonna
Track. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
what event? Sorry. I couldn't.
800.
Okay. Wow.
1,000 indoor. Yeah.
800's gutsy.
Very painful.
It's so painful.
Wow.
If I were faster, I would have happily done like the 2 or the 4.
Right. That's easy.
I would have loved it.
800.
I ran
maybe
the
even
4 in high school. I just
4 is pretty brutal too. But
4 is brutal.
Yeah. 4 and 8. I'm not sure. Like.
Yeah, the thing with the 8 for me, it's like you're almost sprinting
Right.
for 2
Right.
laps.
That's my point. Yeah.
And you have a finite amount of energy. So it's like, how do you, and I had I played tennis in high school. And so I had really strong quads. My hamstrings were less strong. So that's what ended my career. I had hamstring injuries. So it's like, I mean, for me, it was like, okay, do you go run a 55 quarter and then just like hold on, or like, or do you like, what do you do? And if I could do it all over again right now with my personal trainer, I'm doing one-legged hamstring curls on the wheeler.
Now, yeah.
Like if we could do now if we could do what we're doing now, like our ice baths, and I'd have no inflammation. I'd be like superhuman.
Yeah, that's cool though. I did not know that. That says, I think just the discipline, the consistency you learn from being a really competitive athlete just transcends in life and in business so big. It's incredible.
1,000,000%.
You write the preamble yourself.
I write the preamble.
And where does that come from? What does that
It comes from my
like?
heart.
Right.
And also from, depending on, I did a series of things after the fire.
Of course.
Normally I'll give a view on the market, currently and where things are trending. And I'll usually have something that's inspiring in there. My sign off is ABC, always be celebrating.
Oh, nice.
Usually
like
when
that.
you celebrate,
So-
you're closing a lot.
Love that.
At a closing today. Do some celebrating
Love
tonight. And I'd love to talk about some of my practices, my spiritual practices that have definitely led towards where I am today. So I'll do the preamble. The market reports we have access to, we'll customize them. And we'll do it for like 6 areas generally. The listings, I create the listings, she puts it in. She researches all the events.
You do your listings plus other relevant listings?
No, only mine.
Okay.
Actually, the last few newsletters, the last one I teased a really big listing that I'm about to do. The 2 prior, there were no listings in there. So it's not,
Sure.
The newsletter it is marketing, but it's more connection. It's not just like, check out these listings. It's more like, hey, I'd love to update you. I'd love to add value. I'd love for you. I'd love to, maybe teach you something. health and wellness is a big part of my life. So as is gratitude. And so I'll infuse a bunch of, sometimes, practices that like I will outline practices that people can do during Thanksgiving. I had gratitude practices. Valentine's Day, heart opening practices, stuff like that. So how much time do I spend on it a week? Less than 2 hours for sure.
Less than 2 hours, not per week,
I guess every other, so like per month, let's say like maybe 8 hours or less, 6 hours maybe.
Okay. And it comes back to just authenticity and how do you distinguish? I mean, you're clear that is not what most, if almost any agents do.
Yeah.
So, but it's very authentic to you, and that's the beauty of it.
Thanks.
How many recipients do you have on your?
So I have about 15,000 in my CRM.
And you've been doing it for how long?
When I started doing it, I started doing it in early 21. So I've been doing it for a solid 4 years.
What did you start with? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be at Rodeo Realty, and the founder has a very vanilla, just kind of bullet point market stat stuff, and I would literally just copy and paste that, and that was my market update. And I think I added a couple things.
How many people in your database then? Do you recall roughly? Or
less than maybe 1,000.
Okay, so it's grown. Wow.
It's grown substantially.
Okay. And how do you spearhead that growth?
Earlier on, a bunch of title search, like owner occupied homes.
And then you would blind email them.
Yep.
Do you measure your open rate and unsubscribe rate?
And and before you answer that, and what are you using? What platform are you using?
It's contactually.
Okay.
Which is what I'm using now. I used to use Line's Desk.
Line's
Desk.
Okay.
I think like a few years ago. That's what it was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was in 2021. One of the things my coach suggested is, reaching out to owner. Like if I had a buyer who's looking for a type of home, let's say in Mandeville Canyon, it happened in Mandeville. So this is a story, I sent it out. I've got a clients, they're, a young family looking for 3 to 4 bedroom, blah, 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 blah. If you have any interest in selling, please let me know. 99.9% of the time, nothing. But this one person was like, if you genuinely do have a buyer, we are going to be selling in the next few months. I ended up bringing the buyer and we made an offer at ask. The sellers decided they wanted more, killed the deal, but I did end up listing the place and getting them 10% more than they originally wanted.
Wow.
Thankfully, the market went up. So
with a different buyer, not
with a different buyer.
Yeah. And did you find the place for that buyer? That originally made the offer? Okay.
We opened escrow in Beverly Hills with that buyer, and they canceled it. And I realized this is a buyer who's not respectful of my time.
Understood.
Yeah.
What's your open rate?
I haven't, honestly, in the last few months, I haven't looked at it, but it's like hovering around like 60%.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's really, really high. Now, it's like 14,900 and change. There are, I want to say there are like 800 or so duplicates, and I just haven't weeded through them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And I'm a firm believer of look around and see what works. I have a friend who has a phenomenal email list, and when he was starting to, he just has a big reputation, has a huge network, it's 100,000 people on his email list, and started with 100,000, and he was starting to do, a weekly thing, and I was like, hey, look at Tim Ferriss's. Tim Ferriss has like 5 bullet point Friday or whatever. I'm like, don't look at this. Like, have you seen it? He said, no, I'm sending it to you now. And then, a few months later, this is a couple of years ago, a few months later, I started looking at it, and now it's like his 7 things, and it really mirrors the Tim Ferriss thing, and it's just, he's just blown up. But again, it's like with you and your, daddy and the dude, it's like the consistency of it is something that's
what's so
super important.
Yeah.
And we've interviewed a bunch of people, obviously, over the years. And there was a woman who kills it in Jacksonville, and she's got this massive outreach thing, and her open rate is way less. And she'll put in the title of the email, what it's about. So somebody will look, it's not the newsletter thing, but she'll like be announcing an event or whatever it is, and her open rate is so much less. And what happens is people see it and they're like, oh, hey, big, event this Friday. And they're like, I'm busy Fridays. They don't open it. It doesn't mean they didn't see it. It doesn't mean they don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
And she's like, and she tells me about like the lead up and follow up on these events. When we were in COVID, I did a Zoom with her, and she told me like this like massive amount of detail on what she does, and her follow-up is so phenomenal. And then I asked her how many people showed up on the Zoom for the event. It was a marvelous event. And she was like, 11. And I was like, oh my God, because I'm not afraid on the podcast to call BS or whatever. I'm like, oh my God, all that for 11. And she's like, okay. And she was so hardcore on the statistics. She's like, well, we sent out 5,300 invites, and we got 1,000 opens, and we got and then eventually they get like 30 people. 30 people said they would attend, and then 11 attended, and then they do this follow up afterwards, like, hey, they did this cooking thing, like, in case I see you didn't make it to the Zoom, but here's the recipe, and it was she had like a chef come on, and nobody wanted to like get on and like cook with her and the chef or like go get the stuff. So, she's like, it makes sense. But she was talking about all of the contact and all of the business that she got from that. And I was like, I'm so glad I interviewed you, because if I had done all of that and I turned to my operations guy and we got 11 people show up,
people are getting fired.
I'd be like, trash this, like forget it,
And give her the punchline. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I thought that was a punchline, but go ahead, tell me the punchline.
Wasn't the punchline that basically through that process of reaching out to everyone, the amount of business that it generated was unbelievable. They didn't have to necessarily show up.
No, this right.
It was just the level starters. Of contact and communication was extraordinary. So it brought like the barometer was not who showed up to the event. The barometer was how much communication, ultimately how much business was generated.
I mean, I'll go ahead and mention who it was. It was a woman named Cece Underwood. I'm pretty sure it was Jacksonville, Florida. And, at the time she was doing like 200, it's a lower price point, but still she was doing 250 transactions a year. And then she also had some other process where she got so many referrals from other agents, which is a whole nother thing, which I can't remember. I have to go back to the episode or re-interview her for that. But just that consistency. And she would tell me that she would actually notice, like from that event that like, somebody's like, hey, Cece, thanks for the invite. And she's just to like back check it. She's like, oh, that was so-and-so. And she goes back in and like, they didn't even open the
email.
They didn't even open the email. So they just saw it come in like,
that's
hey,
all you
welcome
need,
to
that
the
little
event.
Touch.
Yeah.
It's what we always say, just the invite alone is valuable.
Yes.
Even if no one ever shows up.
So, and 100%. That was, we got down the road a bit. So do you measure?
So the two, let me come back first.
Sure.
So bi-monthly newsletter.
Yeah.
What else? What else are you doing to touch people? What systems are you using to leverage and that sphere? Because that's where the business comes from.
Totally. So bi-monthly newsletters, I do monthly mailers just to my sphere, not to farming neighborhoods or anything like that.
And how big is your sphere?
My mailers are only like 300, to be honest. Yeah.
So what do you call the 15? That's your database?
That's like my CRM database.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where your sphere, how do you define your sphere?
Usually,
how do you define those 300?
So I'll group my database. I'll have like monthly mailers, weekly economic newsletters, like group one, friend, blah, 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 blah. The monthly mailers are generally people I've either done a transaction with, I'm really close with, or someone who's referred business to me. Yeah.
And what's the monthly mailer consist of?
I mean, I kind of want to show you, because I'll do some funny stuff. Here's one thing that I'll show you as well, just for shits and giggles. So I'll do client appreciation events. Here, I did a pickleball invitational for my clients with, trophies, hats, gear, shirts, catered. And it's a way to get that was a really nice personal touch where I got a bunch of mostly clients out on a Saturday afternoon endorphins high. I, you know, just to have fun with I know business will come out of it. I'm going to do this once a year.
Yeah.
I'll do various client appreciation events during the year. Now I want to show you.
And we'll make note of this in the podcast notes because we'll.
Yeah.
So I'll do fake magazine covers with me.
Cool.
Malibu Sun is not a paper, but I had multiple people, a couple of
So
models.
funny.
They were like, "Congratulations, you got the cover." I'm like,
Right.
There's
You know-
no magazine. So email newsletters, monthly mailers. I make it a habit to have 50 conversations, not about real estate, with
Interesting.
people in my sphere a week.
So I'm curious about that because we coach that. I always say who's ever having the most conversations is doing the most business.
Exactly.
And I do say that
Me too.
turn them into purposeful conversations explicitly, not necessarily leading with real estate, but where real estate is intentionally prompted. So tell me about that. So it's not like, how often, you may not lead with that, you may not, but like tell me more, unpack the
But
conversation.
they ask you about real
Right,
estate.
that's
or-
what
They often do.
Right, okay.
Because they know I do real estate.
Right,
So I pretty much never have to bring it up unless they're like, what's new? Well, since you asked.
So
Right.
my question
But-
to you is,
Yeah.
of the 50,
Yeah.
what percent end up mentioning real estate?
Tough to judge, but a much smaller minority, I
Really?
would say. Yeah, I'd say probably definitely less than 50%.
Okay, so let me ask you this too, though.
Yeah.
Sorry, of those 50, who were those 50? Sorry, I didn't like.
It's out of the 300.
Yeah,
Right.
they're out of,
they're out of the-
generally out of the 300.
Okay, so sorry, but then that changes it because then they all know you're in real estate.
Everyone I'm talking to, every one of those 50 conversations, all of them know I'm in real estate.
Okay.
So they will inevitably, whether it's on that conversation or the next time we have coffee or lunch.
What's your
we'll
excuse
bring it
to
up.
call?
Yeah,
So what's
there you
that
go.
call look like?
It can be any number of things. Like, you know, so if it's somebody who I'm like in flow with, like we're constantly texting, one thing that I'll do when I, like a voice conversation, I consider it like voice to voice. So I will consider back and forth voice notes as a conversation.
Okay.
Now, that might take 30 seconds for me to leave a voice note and 30 seconds to receive a voice note. So 1 minute instead of like a 7-minute call. Heard the voice.
So that's what qualifies. It has to be either a actual conversation or a voice message two-way.
Yep, exactly. Two-way voice message, which I
When
find
you call, is it like, hey, I'm just calling to check in?
No, it's like, hey, like, just thinking about you, or like, you know, I was just playing pickleball. Do you want to like get on the court and then we get into a conversation, or, you know, I was just driving someone I've sold a house to, just driving down. I literally just passed your house. Thought of you. How are you doing? Or I mean, it could be anything. Like
And you'll
once,
leave that voicemail, but that doesn't count.
if they respond with a voice note, it does count. I mean, sometimes it's a call. Like it depends. Like sometimes it's a voice note. Sometimes it's like, you know, they've sent me an email, or you know, sometimes it's like a voice note. Hey, it's been a really long time. Like, would love to grab lunch. When's good for you? Or like, are you back? I know you've been traveling. Da 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 da. So
That's when that's
This would
50 a
keep you
week.
so busy.
Okay, so that's 10 a day, or you know,
10
depending.
a day,
right?
yeah, basically.
And are you really tracking that?
Not as well as I could be. I mean, with my coach, we have a forum to do it. I'm this year.
Are you still with Colwell?
No.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. There's a book that I read and loved called Ninja Selling. So I was with
Oh,
Dave
yeah.
for like 3 years.
Right.
I did a training. So I went to Africa a couple years ago. Big developers on the trip. He's become a friend. His name is Chad McWhinney. And he said, you know, you got to read this book. I think this is.
You're
Go down.
thinking.
There we go.
All right. Okay.
And Chad's like, you got to read this book. I read the book. Chad's mentioned multiple times in the book. I was like, oh my God. Chad's like, yeah, the author Larry Kendall is my mentor. And so he said, you should do an in-person training. I did an in-person training, got along great with Larry. And then I said, you know, to Larry, I'd love to coach with the best coach in your organization. He introduced me to a coach by the name of Eric Zimmerman, who I'm coaching with now. And oh yeah, you just asked
About
still coaching.
tracking and accountability.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are all of these forms and systems. I'm at a place like yesterday. I just brought a new agent onto my team. Super excited about. You know, I've known her for years. Where in January I had a $25 million Malibu listing burned to the ground. Unfortunately, it was my best listing at the time. Bunch of, I think I had 3 escrows at the time, all in Topanga, all died. And I was like, okay, cool. What was going to be the best month ever is now
just got pushed back to
0, but it just got pushed back.
Yeah.
And what I did is I knew it was going to come back. I mean, I wasn't in any way freaking out. I knew it was going to come back. It was a black swan event, but I just, with consistency, kept doing, what I did really during the fires is I volunteered hardcore and I got really involved. And that led to a lot of business. Like I did it, I was like concerned about my neighborhood. And I was like, I'm not going to focus. I can't focus on anything else. I can't even really think straight right now. So, we set up a volunteer fire brigade, all of these things. And a number of people decided after the fires that they want to sell. So, I'm getting ready to list 6 new homes.
Wow.
Yeah, one today, smaller condo in Santa Monica, but beautiful home in Mandeville, Billy Bob Thornton's former home, actually.
Wow, nice.
Really cool home. Amazing architectural in the hills by Runyon, right off Nichols Canyon, actually, on Wattles. Beautiful $50 million Andalusian estate in Beverly Hills.
Because I was going to prompt you for it. I'm excited for that.
Big
event coming up.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah. But only you two are invited.
We'll be supporting you on that.
Thank you very much. Yeah. A bunch of things coming up, and also a really beautiful compound in Woodland Hills, of all places, like in the hills.
Sure.
Dave Chappelle's agent's home. Yeah, I'm just like, okay, well, this is a lot. Like, I should be able to track all my conversations, but I'm not fully doing that. But I know I'm doing things with consistency. So I brought this agent on, and she's gonna help and it allowed me to focus more on my processes again. And I also wanted somebody who's had several transactions under their belt and is not a new agent who I don't have to coach from day one.
What's missing in your business? So what piece of technology, what problem needs to be solved?
I'd say scalability. So this will be I've never had 6 listings at once. This will be I've never had 6 listings that aren't including land listings, or 6 new listings that are single family home listings. It's basically enough people to sit the open houses, and enough support so that I can continue to I'd like to be in my zone of genius at all times, and that's oftentimes not in front of a computer. That's doing things like this and with clients and socializing, doing the things that I love, playing pickleball, playing tennis.
I love it.
Relationship building.
Yeah. That's literally, if I could do that all day, I told my coach, it's like, if I could just go to one birthday party a day, that's all I would need to do.
Yeah, you can with the right team and systems.
I mean, I feel like the systems are good, but the right team to help manage all of it. And I've brought on a publicist and a social media manager, and fleshing it out like a podcast publicist, a regular publicist, a social media manager, to grow in that way. I feel like content. I think what you're doing here is so smart with the podcast. Brilliant.
Yeah, there are so many ways, and we can help you with it for sure. One of the things, it depends on what you want to do, but one of the things I've been working on for a while is just increasing people's visibility online, and really hitting the low hanging fruit. And it has taken me a while to learn how to do it. But now I've got it to a science where I can really distinguish someone, and they're the things that are a lot less obvious. There's a program called schema.org, which is just the way that it's structuring things in a way that all the search engines have sort of gotten together and say, okay, we'll create this formula. This is the way we're going to search for things. Knowing what the primary sources are for the top AI models, like ChatGPT will lean a lot heavier into certain things, like LinkedIn and YouTube. You can see it when you get your searches. What are the sources are used? Perplexity that overlays. You can see the sources, and generating content that answers the questions that people are asking, and it's actually pretty easy to figure out what they're asking, and then you just and then if you shoot a short form video, you can do it with an iPhone. You really can. And then you transcribe it. It can be an article or a blog or whatever. And it's got all those keywords in, because you have the keywords in front of you. What are the things that people are searching for all the time? And there's a way to really do that. And that's the less complicated stuff.
Yeah.
And the more complicated stuff is, figuring out, which I've finally gotten my arms around, like how to optimize on Google to the point where you get a Google Knowledge Panel, which is like a Wikipedia page. It's Google's way to supplant that. I just worked very hard to get Josh one. I had one for myself, and it's just all these different things. And there's a lot of
like an authority.
Yeah, there's a lot of different many little boxes to check, and none of them are particularly heavy lifts. In fact, the thing that I mentioned first is much more of a heavy lift. It's like, the easiest lift, by the way, is a Google business profile.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, you should have
very
that.
helpful too.
Super helpful.
For searchability.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because Google's trying to take over Yelp and is trying to take over Expedia. That's why when you look for a flight, it's like you get your Google results. They're trying to move into all those different areas and to figure out a way to be part of that movement. You're going to get lifted by without spending a lot of money. So I definitely, we'll do it offline, but I'd be interested in what you're doing with the social media manager is recommending, what they're charging, that sort of thing. It could be
so
some
tell
ideas.
tell us what's the vision for the future for you? Like I always ask the question, what does the ideal world look like this year? What does it look like 3 to 5 years from now?
I'll start macro. 3 to 5 years from now, I see a beautifully cohesive, harmonious, self-sustaining team, boutique, that has a really robust business that is consistent, referral based, luxury down to starter homes, not just luxury. I've noticed, I live in Topanga, I sell a bunch in Topanga, and there are certain agents who are like just Topanga. And when the boulevard closes, which has happened twice now in the last year, their business is ravaged. I like to hedge. So not just luxury, starter.
And this has come from someone who has got a $50 million listing. So
yeah,
rarely do I hear that coming from someone who's got a proven track record already in the luxury world, which is brilliant.
And again, Gary will tell you, the $100 million listings are the headliners, and that, he makes, the bread and butter are the ones that are the singles and the doubles.
100%. And those are more consistent. There are way more buyers. They cost less to market.
They're faster.
They're faster. I mean, would I rather have like one $50 million listing or like 5 to 10 million or like 10 $5 million listings? Probably. I'd rather have 9 $5 million listings and one $50 million.
There you go. And that's where you got it. Yep. They serve a different purpose.
Not mutually exclusive.
Yes.
Yeah. So, a cohesive team that is, I feel like, Chris Cortazzo's got a pretty good model. There are several agents who have good models. I would love to have, I don't need to be a sole rainmaker. I would love to, mentorship is something that I'm excited about. So I would love to have a series of agents who I empower, who become rainmakers in their own right. And we're sharing clients back and forth, increasing the referral business a bunch. One of the listings is from an agent in Austin who I met in Africa, actually. I'm so glad I went on that trip. I'm not looking to build a mega team. I'm not looking to start a brokerage or anything like that. I don't want that responsibility. It doesn't interest me. What interests me is working with wonderful, cool, interesting people who are doing big things in life outside of real estate, clients, helping them in extraordinary ways and having a lot of fun doing it. I like to dance in homes. I do, this event in a couple weeks in Beverly Hills, I'm going to have a tarot card reader. I've got I don't know if either of you are familiar with kava, but it's a plant-based, sure. It's like a serotonin increaser. So we're going to do a kava mocktail bar with heart-opening intention-setting ceremonies. We've got a DJ who's like a sound shaman who's going to create a soundscape.
You say you have the didgeridoo.
Well, it's almost this is the vibe is going to be eyes wide shut without the sex party. So somebody opens the palace doors. There's going to be a beautiful woman who's going to smudge them with, Palo Santo or sage. They come in. Pua, my assistant, who does sound baths at Equinox, will be serenading people through the home with a sound bath.
Cool. See, I'm
in.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
It'll be a seduction.
Right.
Is the plan.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So having a lot of fun while doing it.
And then wrap it up with this year. Like, is there anything specific that you want to intentionally accomplish?
So the way I like practice real estate and look at it, I do quantum meditations where, in the past in my life, I've had like goals, like money goals, all these types of goals. And when I've set things up that way, I've never succeeded in that way. So what I do now is I do a form of breath work called pyramid breath work to change my state, bring my brain waves down. And then when I enter the meditative state, and I'm self-guiding myself in this quantum meditation, I'm feeling what it feels like. For instance, on this property, big 21,000 square feet, 9 bed, 18 bath, almost 4 acres in Beverly Hills, palatial, beautiful. I knew months in advance that the seller was looking to sell. And so I would sit in the meditation and picture myself in the home as the realtor opening the home for people, and how empowering it felt to open the palace door, to be the gatekeeper, to be the person who's representing this palace. Then I continued doing that for weeks and months until I met the owner. And there were tons of celebrity realtors who were involved in his decision-making process, and I continued to do it. Then he called me back in and I met with him solo, and I gave him a very custom type pitch on what I would do for this property. Continued doing the meditation. Then I got the listing. He was out of town. I had to go there to pick up keys and remote, et cetera. I hadn't done my practice that morning, so I did it in the house. And I was like, oh, wow. Now I'm in the house, envisioning myself doing what I was doing. Then a few weeks later, as part of...
and he probably saw him on the camera. I was like, okay, I picked the right guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, so I trademarked the phrase from staged to saged. And I have my own brand of sages, my own personal brand of sages. So when I first met him, I gave him and his girlfriend at the time sages. And the sage, honestly, is the differentiator that I'm told. His girlfriend was like, I like this guy, he does things differently. After I did the practice solo in the house, and I do this with clients who I believe would be open to this kind of experience, that would resonate with. And I know that because a very close friend of mine who's a very high level shamanic energy worker made the introduction to the owner. So I knew he'd be open to something like this. I led him and his girlfriend at the time in a breathwork and intention setting ceremony to call him the most aligned buyer. And after the ceremony, he looked at me, he's like, do you do this for all your clients? And, I said, only those who I think would be open to it. And I had just given him a custom candle. I created the scent for a candle, and I like to make the tour a multi-sensory experience. So it's visual, it's sensory, you can smell it, taste, touch, etc. And he looked at his girlfriend, he was like, even if you don't sell this home, you've done better than any realtor I've ever met. And so in the meditation, I'm now sitting with the owners in the house, after I've gotten it, leading them through the process of calling in the most aligned buyer. And I'm like, wow, I'm just jumping timelines with this meditation, and I've implanted myself here. And then last week I did some content there, and I ended up, there's a 35-foot water slide that flows through a waterfall into the pool, and I slid it.
Can I ask you, how did you get the appointment?
So my friend who knows the owner had told me months in advance, listen, he's looking to list this property. 3 years ago, he listed it with Josh Altman for $85 million. And he said, listen, he's looking to downsize. He's looking to list the property. He's talking to other agents. I'm going to suggest you. So I met with him, spent about 90 minutes there. And it happened to be actually December 4th, 2024. It was my 5-year anniversary.
Right, December 3rd, I wrote it down.
Yeah. Wow. Day after my birthday. And it was the 5-year anniversary of me actually starting. Yep, because I started in December.
That's cool.
And so, I said I'd love to come. I'd love to share a bespoke marketing presentation for this property with you. And he said, sure. He followed up a couple weeks later. Do you have it? I said, of course. But I'd love to give it to you in person, knowing, obviously, personal touch. We, instead of it being like a handoff, it was another like 90 minutes. And I basically said, listen, I'm not going to treat this property as a listing. I'm going to treat it as a product launch. I'm going to create a brand identity around your home.
We just talked about
those,
fire coaching,
Yeah.
Forward One coaching. Yep.
The whole thing. And, the level of intentionality is going to be unlike anything you've ever seen. And I promise you that. You have all of my attention. And so we shook on it, and then it took another couple weeks to do the DocuSign, but got that done.
Wow.
And actually, this is the logo that I created for the property. The horizon.
Oh, wow. We
That's
just
cool.
talked about in
Yeah.
Forward One coaching how to market a property and brand it and tell its
Really,
story
yeah.
and make it unique.
Yes.
And I mean, couldn't be more.
And it doesn't have to be a $50 million
Right.
house.
Nope.
It's nowadays with all of the tech that's out there,
Right.
and doing a website, property website. Of course, everybody is doing that probably for $5 million plus house, but you can do it so inexpensively now to do that for $1.5 million listing
Yep.
or less. You can do all these things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Wow, it's freaking amazing, man. Yeah,
It's,
so very
yes,
inspiring.
mind-blowing and
the
different.
authenticity, the gratitude, the engagement. Like that, to me, one big word comes out to you're engaged.
Yeah.
Right. You're in motion. You're taking action. You're asking questions. You're taking initiative, and nothing's going to fall on anyone's lap. You got to be intentional. You got to be and people need to feel that it's real and it's authentic, and that you're in it for them as well
Totally.
as yourself, and
Yeah.
that's fine. That's the beauty of
Well,
it.
as yourself,
Yeah.
you're the byproduct. You're
and being authentic, so that leaning into the things that your
superpowers.
it just doesn't work. Like if you're really into pickleball, makes sense to lean into that.
Yeah.
If you're into a meditation, breath work, it makes sense to lean into that. For somebody else to listen to this, be like, okay, so let's do pickleball and breath
People
work.
feel that. They,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Everybody has something, some way of connecting, and leaning into that in a genuine
Yeah.
way.
giving back.
Or we're going to wrap this
Yeah,
up.
it's been a pleasure.
So amazing.
Yeah,
we could do hours.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So fire round, and
Great.
basically, each of these questions we're going to try and hold ourselves to not commenting. Each of these questions could be 10 minutes, but we'll ask you a question, give us an answer, we'll move on, and just take it from there.
Great.
Fire round. What's your idea of perfect happiness?
Harmony of the mind, harmony of the body, and enough abundance to do anything I choose at any given point.
Yeah.
What's the best compliment you've ever received?
I love being in your energy.
What's an insult you received that you're proud of?
I'm going to have two answers for you. First answer, I was at Burning Man for the first time last year. The head of my camp is used to run a major network. And before he met me, he checked out my website and my Instagram. And he told me that he thought I was just a total douche. I thought that was hysterical because I felt like it said more about him than it did about me. He's a great guy. Greatest insult that I've come as a compliment. Running club track in high school, I had a coach who said, Adam, you train too hard. He was right. I injured myself, but it was pretty courageous, though, I would say.
What's the attribute you most admire in others?
Kindness.
What's a talent you'd most like to have?
Painting is what came to me.
What's your most treasured possession?
First thing that comes to mind, I recently got this watch that every year in Geneva, they have it's called the Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève. They have a series, it's almost like a Michelin star. They have a series of subcategories. And this watch won the Petit Augier award. It's, I wish I was wearing it, actually. It's just a beautiful Swiss timepiece. they took, most automatic watches have all these jewels like rubies and sapphires. They took the color out of all the jewels, so the face is just 100% red. It's without any jewels. It's titanium, grade 5 titanium, and it's a watch within a watch. So it's got like a floating watch on top of the watch face, and it just feels like a piece of art. And I really like it. I also like certain, there are a few hats that I've had made. This is one of them. I love hats. Good way to start a conversation.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people will stop you.
So Adam, you do a hike. A lot of great hikes in LA. If you do a hike, you go all the way up. Beautiful view. We've got a great view today. Sort of a hard hike. You get all the way to the top of the hike, and you look down, and it's your family and friends, colleagues, community, and you shout one thing. What do you shout?
The first thing that came to mind is "I love you."
Awesome. Honestly, what I thought you were going to say. To be honest, that's awesome. Yeah. Amazing.
Pleasure.
Very inspiring. We'll have to do a
Thank you.
continuation.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.